The final girl trope is one of the most overused conventions in horror, particularly within the slasher subgenre. This group of feisty and fearless women, most of whom are the sole survivors of their respective films, include Sidney Prescott from Scream, Laurie Strode from Halloween, and Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street, all of whom share the resilience, smarts, and strength necessary to somehow survive boogeymen, slashers, and serial killers alike. Whilst many have critiqued the trope for its ostensibly misogynistic undertones, wherein the morally pure female character is somehow the only one that deserves to live, these horror heroines remain common within the genre, even within those meta-horror films like Scream, which have attempted to challenge the continued presence of such cliched characters. But where are horror's final boys? Accounting for some of horror's most iconic characters, we're looking at you, Ashley J. Williams, final guys are a rare but often welcome addition to any horror film. Here then are the 10 best horror films whose final survivors are Scream Kings, not Scream Queens. I'm Amy from What Culture, and here's the 10 best horror films with final guys. 10. Dewey Riley in Scream. Whilst Sidney Prescott is on the surface depicted as the true final girl of the Scream franchise, the lovable, dim-witted Sheriff Dwight Dewey Riley has also lived through it all. This 4-part film series wherein a group of teens and young adults are stalked by the stab-happy serial killer Ghostface, a masked murderer whose identity has been adopted by several different characters, has treated its audience to a variety of creative, gruesome, and bloody murders. Even likeable fan favourites, such as Jamie Kennedy's Randy Meeks, have suffered grisly demises, and the series has consistently established that no character is truly safe from the twisted exploits of the various Ghostfaces. Regardless, 3 characters have notably survived the series so far: Sidney, Gale Weathers, and of course Dewey. Wes Craven had originally planned for Dewey to die in the first Scream, but accurately sensing that this funny and resilient character would be well received amongst audiences, he decided that this sweet sheriff deserved to survive. Thanks, Wes. 9. Jesse Walsh in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge. Since the release of this ultimately underwhelming horror sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge has emerged as something of a cult classic, and its protagonist, Jesse Walsh, is kind of considered a horror gay icon. The film sees Jesse and his family move into a house once occupied by Nancy Thompson, the teenage girl stalked by the sadistically murderous Freddy Krueger in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. Jesse finds himself possessed by the spirit of the sinister serial killer, who forces him to kill countless victims with increasingly bloody and gruesome means. Upon release, the film was critically slammed, and many still consider this sequel as one of the weakest in the series. However, in retrospect, the film has been lauded in some quarters for its intriguing gay subtext, an aspect of the film which star Mark Patton has discussed at length, embracing his status as a horror icon amongst the gay community. Whilst Jesse's fate is ambiguous and the ending of the film doesn't make it clear if he's been possessed by Freddy once again, this final guy is an undeniable Scream King, and his unique legacy is completely unequivocal. 8. Brent Mitchell in The Loved Ones. Underrated Australian horror film The Loved Ones stars Xavier Samuel, who, depending on your cinematic tastes, you may recognise from the Twilight Saga as Brent Mitchell, an unlucky teenager invited to a depraved dinner party by his classmate Lola. After rejecting Lola's invitation to attend their school's prom together, Brent is kidnapped by her and her equally disturbed father, who then tie him up and torture him. Although Lola attempts to lobotomize him, Brent eventually manages to escape, defending himself against his crazed captors and ultimately killing Lola with his car. Reunited with his girlfriend and mum, Brent is able to safely return home, undoubtedly scarred both mentally and physically by his arduous experience. Brent emerges as the unlikely but likeable hero of this film, defying all the odds in his daring escape and survival. 7. Chris Washington in Get Out. Jordan Peele's darkly funny and genuinely shocking horror hit Get Out stars Daniel Kaluuya as Chris Washington, an African-American photographer who visits his white girlfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Armitage, in upstate New York. Chris is perplexed by a series of unexplained happenings happenings, and in an unexpected twist, we eventually discover the ghastly truth. The Armitage couple want to transplant the consciousness of one of their wealthy white clients into Chris's body. Despite the Armitage's ardent attempts to incapacitate and ultimately trap him inside his own mind, Chris is able to escape the evil doings of this twisted family and attempts to flee. As the film draws to a close, it appears unlikely that Chris will actually survive, but eventually he's helped and saved by his friend Rod. Chris's survival is as refreshing as it is unexpected, and the character enjoys the closest thing there is to a happy ending in horror. 6. Jim Halsey in The Hitcher. The Hitcher follows Ryder, a crazed hitchhiker with homicidal impulses, as he stalks his newest victim, Jim Halsey. Mercilessly harassed by Ryder, Jim attempts to attract the attention of the police, but ultimately receives no help, as the deranged Hitcher murders everyone, including police officers and an entire young family, on his journey to kill Halsey. After just injuring him when running him over, Jim is finally able to kill this motorway murderer by shooting him multiple times with a shotgun. Surviving this film is no easy feat, as Ryder will and does kill anyone he encounters. Regardless, Jim doesn't give up, and he's finally able to find the strength both mentally and physically to take down this psychotic killer once and for all. 5. John Tate in Halloween H20. Played by young Josh Hartnett in one of his first feature film roles, John Tate is the son of Laurie Strode, the iconic final girl who's had to take on the murderous Michael Myers at several points in the Halloween series. Halloween H20 is considered one of the strongest sequels in the Halloween franchise, with the plot of this film seeing Laurie tracked down to the exclusive private school where she lives and works. Michael desperately tries to kill both Laurie and John, but the former manages to get her son to safety before a final showdown. The final fight between Michael and Laurie is as gloriously violent as it is iconic, and this hair-raising battle ultimately ends with the latter decapitating Michael. Nonetheless, whilst Laurie will of course be the most iconic Halloween character, and perhaps the most iconic final girl ever, her son has clearly inherited his mother's resilience and smarts. 4. Alex Browning in Final Destination. Alex Browning is the protagonist of the first film in the Final Destination franchise, a successful horror series which centres on the ills which may befall those who try to cheat death. Whilst boarding a flight to Paris with his school friends, Alex has a premonition wherein the plane crashes almost immediately after takeoff, horribly killing everyone aboard. Panicking, Alex manages to disembark the flight and several of his pals follow, only to watch as the plane, with many of their friends still aboard, explodes in mid-air. Following this, the survivors are picked off one by one, dying in a series of outlandish freak accidents. Alex, however, is able to cheat death once more, and whilst he does eventually die in the sequel, his survival in the first Final Destination film was a refreshing and unexpected twist. 3. Paxton Rodriguez in Hostel. The first offering in the gruesome Hostel franchise starts with the misadventures of a trio of American and Icelandic tourists, Paxton, Josh and Ollie. Whilst travelling through Europe, the group land themselves in trouble, and all three are hideously tortured by an insidious and unknown organisation targeting foreign backpackers. Unlike Paxton, Ollie and Josh are brutally killed by their sadistic captors. However, the comparatively fortunate Paxton is ultimately and unexpectedly able to survive. The terrified tourist is actually even able to kill one of his deranged would-be murderers. Paxton is eventually killed off in the follow-up, dying in an underwhelming off-screen decapitation. However, his bravery, resilience and strength enable him to escape in this first one, cementing his position as one of horror's most impressive final guys. 2. Dr. Lawrence Gordon in the Saw franchise. Dr. Lawrence Gordon is the ultimate final guy of the Saw franchise, outliving many of the Jigsaw Killer's victims, accomplices, and co-conspirators. At the end of the first film, the audience assumed that Lawrence, who chopped off his foot so as to escape one of Jigsaw's grisly traps, has likely died from the associated physical trauma and blood loss. However, in an unexpected twist, we discover in Saw 3D that Lawrence actually survived his makeshift amputation. Inspired by his would-be victims' sheer resilience and will to survive, Jigsaw made Lawrence his accomplice, and the Doctor eventually becomes one of Jigsaw's most successful and trusted allies. This shocking reveal renders Lawrence both a final guy and a secondary antagonist, as well as both a survivor and a perpetrator of Jigsaw's gruesome games. All in all, whilst Dr. Gordon is technically one of the central villains in the series, the fact that he survived the events of the first film does in retrospect make his character one of the the only survivors of the Saw series, outliving the likes of Jill Tuck, Detective Mark Hoffman, and even Jigsaw himself. 1. Ash Williams from the Evil Dead franchise. Ash Williams is not only cinema's best final guy, but is arguably also one of horror's most iconic and most beloved characters. Portrayed by Bruce Campbell, the perennially cursed Ash has survived demons and deadites alike to emerge as the ultimate Scream King. Sam Raimi's The Evil and Evil Dead 2 are cult classic horror films, which chart the disastrous consequences of finding the Book of the Dead and unintentionally summoning one badass demon. Only Ash survives the events of the first film, as his friends and girlfriend are possessed and ultimately killed off. In the sequel, Ash once more has to battle uncontrollable deadites before ultimately being transported to medieval Europe via a space-time vortex, and then even going on to headline his own Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series for 3 seasons. This guy is literally unstoppable. Whilst in the first original Dead film, Ash can sometimes appear as cowardly and incompetent, this ultimate horror badass grows to be a brave, demon-killing icon. Campbell's sensational performance has earned him a spot in horror history, which we believe is totally deserved. And that brings us to the end of this list of 10 best horror films with final guys. If you have any more favourite final fellas, then let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.